The cold hit Jack like a punch the moment he stepped out of the small shuttle that had carried him across the northern frontier of the colony planet. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, sticking to his coat and freezing the edges of his gloves. The wind cut through him as if it knew every weak spot in his clothing. He had expected the northern territories to be harsh, but not like this. Not like a storm that could erase a man from the world in a few hours. Jack had been alone for days, tracing the route to a small mining outpost where he was to deliver equipment. The route should have been clear, the sensors on his hoverbike reliable. Yet nature, or this alien version of it, had its own plans. The hoverbike shuddered and then stopped dead in the middle of the snow-covered plain, its engines screaming briefly before giving up entirely. He cursed under his breath, kicking at the frozen ground. He had been prepared for mechanical failure, but not in the middle of a snowstorm where even breathing felt like a challenge. The sky was a dull gray-white, the sun invisible behind the thick clouds. Jack's breath came out in frosty clouds, and his fingers were turning numb despite the thick gloves he had put on before leaving the shuttle. He knew staying here meant almost certain death if he didn't find shelter soon. Through the blizzard, he saw a faint glow in the distance. It was hard to tell what it was at first. A fire, a vehicle, a settlement. His legs, stiff and slow from the cold, forced him to push forward, each step leaving deep impressions in the snow. The glow grew slowly, forming into the shape of a small cabin nestled between towering crystalline trees. The structures were unlike anything Jack had seen back on Earth. The trees were semi-transparent, their surfaces glowing faintly from within, like veins of light running through frozen glass. The cabin itself seemed built from the same crystalline material, but it had been shaped carefully, smoothed into curves and edges that made it look warm despite the cold glow it emitted. Jack hurried, his body screaming in protest. The snow clung to his coat, his boots filling with ice as he approached. When he reached the door, he rapped on it with his fist, hoping someone was inside. The warmth from the cabin hit him immediately, seeping into his frozen fingers and face. The door creaked open, and he froze. Standing there was a woman, tall, strong, and imposing. Her skin was a warm shade of copper, and her dark eyes were sharp and calculating. She wore practical clothing reinforced with fur and alien materials that seemed to shimmer in the cabin's light. Her hair was long and tied back with strips of leather, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to commanding respect. "You're late," she said simply, her voice calm but firm, with the kind of authority that made Jack's chest tighten. "And if you think you're walking in here expecting a warm bed without earning it, think again." Jack opened his mouth, ready to explain his predicament, but the woman waved him off. "Save your story for the snow. You'll need it out there." She looked him up and down, eyes narrowing. "You're lucky I don't let you freeze outside." Jack swallowed hard. The wind still howled outside, and even now, with the cabin walls between him and the storm, he could feel the cold pressing against him. He realized there was no other choice. The woman tilted her head slightly. "You have a choice. Share my bed or freeze out there." Jack blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Share? Your bed?" he asked, incredulous. The snowstorm outside made him feel desperate, and he realized quickly that the warmth of the cabin was worth more than his pride. I don't have much choice, do I?" Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she stepped aside. "No, you don't." Her tone was teasing, almost mischievous, but her eyes remained steady, commanding. Jack stepped inside, grateful to escape the blinding wind. The cabin smelled of smoke and cooked food, a comforting mix of warmth and sustenance. The walls were lined with alien artifacts, strange tools, carved stones, and glowing containers filled with liquids that pulsed faintly. Everything seemed alive, humming with energy he could not explain. The woman gestured toward a sleeping chamber at the back of the cabin. It was small but cozy, heated by some alien technology that filled the room with a soft glow. Jack realized quickly that the warmth here was unlike anything he had felt before. Even his fingers, numb from the cold, tingled as they thawed. "Sit by the fire," she said, nodding toward a crystalline fireplace at the center of the cabin. "You'll need your strength if you want to survive the night." Jack obeyed, watching, as she moved with purpose, preparing a meal from ingredients he couldn't identify. The food smelled alien, but the warmth and scent of it were comforting. He tried to strike up conversation, but she kept her answers short, measured, and laced with a subtle warning. "Don't touch what isn't yours," she said, pointing at a small chest. "Respect the cabin. Respect me. And you might just survive." Jack nodded, too aware of the storm outside to argue. He ate quietly, the warmth of the cabin and the strange, glowing food helping him regain some of his strength. The woman watched him closely, her eyes sharp and unyielding, as if she were studying every movement he made. He couldn't help but notice how precise and controlled her actions were, the way she moved in harmony with the cabin, her tools, and the strange alien environment. Once the meal was over, she turned to him with a small smirk. "All right, the rules of survival are simple. You stay warm, you don't touch anything I told you not to, and you stay awake if you hear anything outside that shouldn't be there." Jack nodded again. "And if I sleep?" he asked cautiously. "You'll share the bed," she said bluntly. "It's the only way to survive tonight. The temperature outside will kill you before you take your first step tomorrow. Now strip down to your undershirt. You can layer over it if you want, but there's no sense freezing before you even get in bed." Jack hesitated. The thought of sharing such close space with someone he barely knew was uncomfortable, but the snowstorm made the decision for him. He carefully followed her instructions, layering his clothing over the undershirt she had allowed him to keep. She turned away, giving him privacy, though he noticed her eyes flicking back at him occasionally, assessing, measuring. Finally, he got into the bed, which was surprisingly large for the small cabin. It glowed faintly, a soft warmth that seemed to seep into his bones. The woman joined him after a moment, careful not to crowd him, yet close enough that Jack could feel the heat radiating from her body. The silence between them was not awkward. It was tense, charged, and filled with unspoken words. Outside, the storm raged on. The wind slammed against the cabin walls, rattling the crystal panels and making the cabin creak. Jack listened to it, aware that if they weren't careful, this storm could turn deadly in minutes. He stole glances at the woman beside him. She was calm, unshaken, a figure of control and confidence in a world that seemed determined to destroy him. Hours passed with little conversation. Jack tried to rest, but his mind was alive with thoughts of the strange woman, the alien landscape, outside, and the mystery of how survival had brought them together. He had expected a simple night of rest, but instead, he found himself studying her movements, noticing how she adjusted the covers, how she kept one eye on the door, how she seemed to command even the storm in her presence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a howl echoed outside. Jack's eyes snapped open, and he realized that the snowstorm was not the only danger lurking in the wilderness. The sound was not human, not animal, something else, something alien, with teeth and strength designed to survive the harshest conditions. The woman shifted slightly, her hand brushing his arm in a subtle warning. She whispered, "Stay here, don't move, let me handle this." Jack's heart raced. For the first time, he understood that survival on this planet required more than strength. It required trust, intelligence, and a willingness to follow those who knew the rules of this strange and dangerous world. He nodded, trusting her implicitly even though he barely knew her name. She stood, moving to the cabin entrance with the grace of a hunter. Jack watched, amazed, as she used her instincts and tools to assess the situation outside. He could see the outline of a large creature through the crystal walls, its breath misting in the cold air. Her eyes narrowed and she made subtle gestures, preparing herself for whatever would come next. Jack realized, lying there in the warm bed, that the night was far from over. The storm, the alien wilderness, and the mysteries of this fierce woman would keep him alert until dawn. Yet he felt a strange sense of safety, knowing that survival was not impossible if he learned to rely on human ingenuity, and if he learned to trust her. As the hours crept by, the storm continued to rage, and the distant howl repeated, a reminder of the dangers beyond the cabin walls. Jack pulled the covers tighter, feeling the warmth of the woman beside him, knowing that tonight survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant learning from her, respecting her, and discovering what it truly meant to endure in a world that was not designed for humans, but one where humans could adapt, overcome, and survive. By the time the first light of dawn began to filter through the glowing trees, Jack realized that he had made it through the night. He had survived the storm, the cold, and the unknown, and he had done it with someone who seemed almost untouchable in her skill and courage. Yet, even as he exhaled a sigh of relief, Jack woke slowly to a soft glow filling the cabin. The storm had ended. Light from the alien sun filtered through the crystal trees, turning the snow into a shimmering field of pale gold and green. Outside, the world looked peaceful, almost magical, but Jack knew better. The wilderness had tested him the night before, and there would be more challenges ahead. The woman, Nayeli, was already awake. She sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, stretching and adjusting the layers of her alien gear. She looked calm, confident, as if the storm had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Jack watched her for a moment, amazed at her presence. Her eyes, dark and sharp, met his, and he could see the same calculating mind that had ensured his survival the night before. "Morning," she said simply. "You survived. That alone is rare." Jack nodded, still adjusting to the warmth and safety of the cabin. I didn't think I would," he admitted. "The storm, it was worse than anything I've faced." Nayeli's lips curved slightly. "Nature doesn't care about you, Jack. You either adapt or you die. Out here, survival isn't a choice, it's a rule." He realized she already knew his name. Somehow she had learned it during the brief conversation the night before. He wondered how much else she already knew about him. Her observation skills were sharper than any human he had met. She stood and moved to the small crystalline table, preparing a breakfast of alien fruits and a steaming beverage. Jack took a seat, trying to hide his awe. Everything about her, from the precision of her movements to the way she interacted with the cabin, suggested a person who had mastered survival to an extraordinary degree. "You'll need your strength today," she said, placing a plate in front of him. "If you want to live beyond the cabin, you have to learn fast." Jack picked up the food carefully. It smelled strange, but it was warm and filling. He ate slowly, realizing that the night had left him weak. He needed every bit of energy to survive in this wilderness. "What's out there?" he asked finally, unable to contain his curiosity. Nayeli looked toward the cabin door, where the snow still lay thick and untouched except for their own tracks. "The world is alive," she said simply. "Predators, storms, the cold, everything is designed to test strength, wit, and endurance. You will need all three." Jack nodded, understanding that her words were more than just advice, they were a warning. Survival on this planet was not about luck. It was about skill, intelligence, and determination. He felt a strange thrill, the kind that came from facing danger head-on and knowing that human ingenuity could make a difference. After breakfast, Nayeli stood and gestured toward the door. "Come, I'll show you how to survive here. If you want to live, you follow me exactly. Step out of line and the wilderness will remind you why humans don't last long here." Jack followed her, stepping out into the alien snow. The world was dazzling in the light of the rising sun, but Jack could see the dangers everywhere. Large footprints marked the snow around the cabin, probably from the creature that had howled the night before. The tracks led toward the crystal forest where shadows moved strangely and shapes shifted with the light. Nayeli moved confidently, her steps precise. She paused often, listening, scanning the environment, reading subtle signs that Jack would never have noticed. She pointed to faint marks on the snow, explaining, "These are warnings. Predators pass this way. The snow holds messages if you know how to read them." Jack tried to keep up, feeling both exhausted and amazed. Every movement she made was deliberate, controlled, as if she were in perfect harmony with the alien wilderness. He realized that survival here was not just about strength. It was about observation, understanding, and acting quickly. They reached a shallow ravine where the snow had drifted in sharp, dangerous curves. Nayeli knelt, examining the ice carefully. "Cross carefully," she said. "One false step and you're trapped or worse." Jack followed her instructions, carefully placing each boot on the stable sections of ice she indicated. He realized that the lessons she was teaching were subtle but essential. She didn't just show him what to do, she made him think, analyze, and adapt. Once they reached the other side, Nayeli paused, turning to face him. "You're learning," she said. "Slowly, but you are learning. That is what keeps humans alive longer than any predator might expect. Your mind is your greatest weapon." Jack felt a sense of pride. For the first time since the storm began, he felt that he belonged in this world, even if only a little. He had survived the night he was learning, and he was beginning to understand the strange, beautiful planet around him. As they moved deeper into the crystal forest, a low rumble echoed through the snow. Jack froze. Nayeli signaled him to crouch behind a large crystal boulder. Through the gaps, he saw the same creature from the night before. A massive snow beast with thick fur, sharp claws, and eyes that glowed faintly in the morning light. Nayeli whispered, "Stay still. Watch me." She moved silently, circling the creature, using the terrain to hide her approach. Jack followed her as best he could, heart racing, muscles tense. She reached into a small satchel and produced a strange device that emitted a soft pulse of light. The creature paused, tilting its head as if confused. Nayeli's pulse increased slightly, and the beast, frustrated, turned away, moving back into the deeper forest. Jack exhaled a long breath, realizing how close they had come to danger. "How did you—" he started. "I understand them," Nayeli said simply. "Not just their strength, but their habits, their fears. The wilderness is a language. You listen, learn, and act. You survive." Jack marveled at her skills. She wasn't just a fighter. She was a master of the environment, a true predator in her own right, but one who used knowledge and cunning instead of brute force alone. They continued moving, exploring small clearings and observing alien wildlife. Nayeli explained how to read tracks, sense changes in the wind, and recognize signs of predators or storms. Jack absorbed everything, feeling a growing confidence in himself. For the first time, he realized that humans could not just survive in this alien world. They could thrive if they used their intelligence, creativity, and determination. As night approached, they returned to the cabin. Jack felt exhausted but alive in a way he had never felt before. The lessons of the day had tested him, pushed him to think, and forced him to rely on his instincts. He realized that survival was not just about living. It was about understanding the world and adapting to it in ways few humans could. Inside the cabin, Nayeli prepared another meal. Jack helped this time, carrying firewood and arranging supplies. The warmth of the cabin felt different now. It was no longer just a refuge. It was a place of learning, a space where human ingenuity could meet alien skill and find balance. They ate together in silence at first, both tired from the day's exertion. Then Nayeli spoke, her tone softer than before. "You did well today. You listened. You adapted. You didn't panic. That is what makes humans special." Jack looked at her, surprised. "Special?" he asked. "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "Other species survive by instinct, by strength. Humans, you survive because of your mind. Your curiosity, your creativity, your ability to plan and improvise. These things are rare. You are not the strongest, but you can be the most dangerous when you use your head." Jack felt pride and humility at the same time. He had faced death, learned from someone who seemed almost superhuman, and discovered that humans could indeed hold their own on this strange planet. The night passed quietly, filled with conversation about alien landscapes, survival strategies, and the mysteries of the wilderness. Jack learned more about Nayeli's life, her tribe, and the skills she had honed over years of living in the harshest conditions. He shared stories of human ingenuity, of past adventures on Earth and the colonies, and they both laughed at the contrast between the worlds they had known. When the final watch of the night came, they settled into the warm bed once again. Jack felt a sense of safety he had never known. The storm was gone, the creature threats had been managed, and the lessons he had learned made him feel capable, alive, and respected. Nayeli looked at him with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "You might just survive with us yet," she said, echoing the words from the first night. But now they carried respect, not warning. Jack smiled, finally understanding what she meant. Survival was not about fear. It was about respect, knowledge, and courage. And humans, with their ingenuity and adaptability, could survive anywhere, even in the harshest alien wilderness, guided by their minds and hearts. As the first light of dawn broke across the crystal forest, Jack knew that this night and the lessons it had brought would stay with him forever. He had faced the storm, the snow beast, and the wilderness, and he had endured. Humanity's strength was not in brute force, but in intelligence, resilience, and the ability to learn from even the most alien and dangerous situations. And as he drifted into a well-earned sleep, he felt a quiet confidence. He would survive. He would adapt. And perhaps, just perhaps, humans could thrive in a world that seemed at first impossible, but was, in truth, full of opportunities for those brave enough to learn.